Hello and welcome to the first waiver wire show of the 2024 NFL fantasy football season. My name is Adam Levitan, joined by our waiver grinder, John Daigle. Daigle, how's it going today, buddy?
The good news is, at least most of the names we got to copy over from the pre-week one waiver wire. But there were a lot of usage changes, and I made sure to note all of them in the column.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, a lot of this is going to be league dependent. We talk about that all the time. We are covering waivers very thoroughly this year as part of Draft Kit Pro. Of course, we have Daigle's article, which you see here, but then we also have one injury away. You know, I'm always thinking about how can I optimize my lineup at the bottom to have the most upside. A lot of times that's by rostering guys who are one injury away. For example, if you already had Jordan Mason, because he was one injury away from Christian McCaffrey, you don't have to blow your load on Jordan Mason in Fab this week, but we do have that article up on the site. I'll be updating throughout the week there, so be sure to check that out. Also, Discord, Daigle, what time can Draft Kit Pro subscribers get their questions to you in Discord for the waiver wire Q&A?
5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Put it in your phone right now in the calendar. Also, I do change and make a log for the one injury array list and the waiver wire this year on Saturday. The change log will be at the top of the column as it was on Saturday, except most people were still drafting then. So
yeah,
everyone put it in your notes.
Yeah, and that's for people. I know there's a lot of leagues that run waiver Saturday night, Sunday morning. We wanted to have an update for you guys. Daigle is going to handle that as well. All right, Daigle, let's get into it here. So clearly the number one waiver wire ad is Jordan Mason. Hopefully, if you read one injury away, if you read Daigle's week one waiver wire column, you already had Jordan Mason on your roster. It was kind of a weird run out. I thought for sure Christian McCaffrey was playing. Like, for sure. I knew he was banged up, but I thought for sure he was playing. The way that Jordan Mason played last night is probably going to give them some confidence in taking it even easier on Christian McCaffrey. Adam Schefter did suggest last night that Christian McCaffrey is no lock to play in week two. In fact, Adam Schefter suggested that Christian McCaffrey may not even play in week two. So I think if anyone's has Jordan Mason available in their league, they're thinking, how much should I blow here? What's your thoughts on Jordan Mason, Daigle?
For reference, the Saturday before week one, when Mason was still out there, he did go for up to 70% in high stakes leagues. I got him in a couple leagues at 35%, so 350, 351 fab. And I still think that's roughly the right estimate. We don't know how long McCaffrey will be out. And honestly, you'll handle this in the DFS show. This immediate matchup, although the 49ers, you can't look past them. They just put up over 5 yards from play, 32 points against a very respectable defense. But the immediate matchup against Brian Flores' rushing defense is actually a miserable one for Mason. Having said that, when you handle quite literally 100% of the team's backfield touches and McCaffrey's going to be out again, who cares? And so I'm trying to treat it as Mason being an immediate top 12, top 24 option for the volume, and then someone that we need to prioritize, even if McCaffrey were to return, since we don't know if it's going to flare up again or when it's going to flare up again. I know we had a conversation in the Slack. We'll probably go in depth on this on tomorrow's episode for rest of the season top 150, but there are leagues out there where, let's say, J.K. Dobbins or Jordan Mason is an option, and for us, we think J.K. Dobbins is still the better player long-term.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I should note, you know, Christian McCaffrey is a 28-year-old running back with a lot of miles on his tires. It's not because he's quote unquote injury prone or whatever. He is a workhorse back who's 28 years old. And so it would not shock me if Christian McCaffrey has some lingering effects here. If you had the number one overall, forget about the fab stuff for a second. Some leagues, of course, I'm still playing leagues where it's number one. Would you blow number one waiver priority on Jordan Mason, Daigle?
I still would, if only for the other options that we'll get to. Because again, even if, let's say for Jaleel McLaughlin, if Javonte Williams gets injured, there's still an Audric Estime there who didn't earn targets in college, but is still going to compete. Whereas we look at Mason's workload now without McCaffrey, literally outsnapped Isaac Guerendo and Patrick Taylor by a combined 58-4. They just didn't use anyone else.
Yep, for sure. And kid played well. There's no doubt about it. Awesome. Okay. Let's get to this Isaiah Likely stuff. So Longtime listeners are familiar with our love affair with Isaiah Likely. Unfortunately, it took a long time to get here, to the point where I was almost ready to give up. He goes out on national television, first game of the season. Everybody's watching. Isaiah Likely goes absolutely berserk. Now, he didn't play a ton of the snaps. He was still roughly in line with Mark Andrews. They both played 50-something snaps out of, I think it was like 80 plays or 70, high 70s in plays. But man, Likely was insanely productive. The tape bros are out here, Daigle, telling me, oh, don't worry about Mark Andrews. He was bracketed. He was doubled. They left Isaiah Likely open, yada, yada, yada. Where do you come down on Isaiah Likely? Because we have people out here that want to drop a lot of guys for Isaiah Likely right now. Should I drop Kyle Pitts for Isaiah Likely? Should I drop X tight end that I drafted for Isaiah Likely, et cetera, Daigle? Thoughts on how we should handle Likely on the waiver wire?
There is a Mendoza line, probably a Dallas Goedert line for Likely, where maybe you don't want to get into the trenches and bid with the rest of your league mates if you have a serviceable tight end, low end tight end one, let's say. But Likely, I still don't mind fighting for. And I have in our fab suggestions 25 to 31%. I'm, by the way, an odd guy, as in I don't want to bid $30 instead of the 31 to try to go over the top of someone doing an arbitrary number. So I always do add odd suggestions. But it really comes down to what you think the Ravens offense will be, since they led the league in 2 tight end sets. Literally half of their snaps came from 12 personnel against the Chiefs. And maybe that was in its opponent specific game plan. Like Silva mentioned in his matchups column, and the 5 career games that Steve Spagnuolo has played Mark Andrews, he's literally shut him out and did well again this past week. Maybe it was the fact that they wanted to jam Likely targets and use Andrews as more of a decoy in that one. But the fact is, Likely should still be considered their second or third best receiver. It's like, what if Rashad Bateman played a onesie position? And so I'm still treating Likely like a low-end tight end one the rest of the year. I still believe he caps Mark Andrews' ceiling, but Mark Andrews also should still be considered as a ceiling player as well. So I like them both, honestly. And I don't know if we can actually squeeze 2 top 12 tight ends into this lineup, but I want to pretend if so, just because I think Likely is going to be on the field moving forward.
I mean, Likely has been very productive going back to Coastal Carolina, going back to preseason NFL. When Andrews has been out, his underlying stats haven't been great, but he's still been very productive in the box score. My concern on Likely is people are going too far, because the Ravens got behind in this game and ended up throwing it 41 times. That is not Ravens football. That is not the way the Ravens want to play football. They are not going to have 41 pass attempts that often. On the other side of the coin, if you think Rashad Bateman can't play, and I know there's a lot of people out there that think Rashad Bateman can't play, and you think Zay Flowers is this scheme target kind of gadgety guy, they need Isaiah Likely. And also, if you think Mark Andrews maybe isn't all the way right, he did have that tightrope surgery last year, had the car crash this offseason. All these things could lead me to say, hey, I want to be aggressive on Isaiah Likely. So yeah, it's a bit of a push and pull. I like being aggressive on Likely here, though I do think we'll find some floor games, as the Ravens are favored in 14 of their next 16 games. They are not going to get 40 pass attempts off very often.
And I just want to remind everyone to know their league, because maybe you don't even need to come in with $25 out of $100 budget. Maybe 16 is good enough. That's where it comes up to you to decide that.
Okay. Let's go to Jaleel McLaughlin. Really interesting usage. I like Jaleel McLaughlin late in the process. I wasn't really taking him. Last couple of weeks, I started taking a ton of Jaleel McLaughlin because I saw Sean Payton being like, he can run up the middle. Like, they were going to give Jaleel McLaughlin they did in the preseason, up the middle, base carries for Jaleel McLaughlin. And we know he's going to catch passes because that's what he does. And that's what Sean Payton does. I was still surprised in week 1 to see how the usage played out. Javonte actually played a ton of pass snaps, and Jaleel was like running as base a ton. So I don't know if that's bullish or bearish for Jaleel, but either way, he's going to catch a ton of passes. How aggressive on Jaleel McLaughlin, Daigle?
Oh, I came away very bullish because we knew he was going to likely lead the team in target share and snaps on conversions downs, lead their backfield. Yeah. And we got that. I didn't expect 10 carries to Javonte Williams, 8. And more importantly, I didn't expect Javonte to have 9 carries to Javonte, for McLaughlin to have 9 carries to Javonte 7 when they were within 6 points of the Seahawks. That's insane neutral game script volume that McLaughlin just didn't have at all last year. So you could argue he may already even be ahead of Javonte Williams. So I like being aggressive. I don't think your league mates genuinely are going to know that they leaned on McLaughlin in these spots. So I think 15, 16 bucks out of $100 fab is going to be totally fine to get him. But I do want to be aggressive because he's an immediate flex play.
Yeah, and especially in full PPR type setups. And just on a DFS front, I played some McLaughlin, be like, hey, he's the cheapest running back. He's 4,300 near the floor.
Yeah.
And he's going to catch 3, 4, 5 balls. Who knows what else can happen from there? And I would think about it kind of the same way in season long for sure. But yeah, like Daigle said at the beginning, he's not going to consolidate, right? You're not going to get a Jordan Mason type 25 touch game out of Jaleel McLaughlin, no matter what happens to Javonte Williams. All right. You know what? Let's go to this Puka Nacua injury now, Daigle. So here were the routes run on that Sunday night game. Matthew Stafford dropped back 51 times. Cooper Kupp, of course, we'll talk about him on the rest of the season Top 150 show tomorrow. Cooper Kupp, 51 routes on 51 dropbacks. Demarcus Robinson, who Daigle has listed here, 47 routes on 51 Matthew Stafford dropbacks. Tyler Johnson was the direct replacement for Puka Nacua after Puka Nacua went down. Tyler Johnson ran 33 routes. And honestly, I thought played reasonably well. Tutu Atwell ran 4. And the interesting one, Daigle, is preseason hero Jordan Whittington ran 0 routes in the game. He was active. He ran 0 routes in this game, which actually really, really surprised me. So how are you thinking about handling Demarcus Robinson and all these other Rams wide receivers now that we know Puka is going to miss at least 4 weeks? And honestly, I'm scared he's going to miss more.
I'm still in on Demarcus Robinson, if only because how they used him beginning last year, whenever he overthrew Tutu Atwell in 3 wide sets, has literally led the team in end zone targets in that time. And even when he came off the bench Sunday, tied Cooper Kupp with 1 end zone target each. So still in on him. For Tyler Johnson, it's just like Zamir White, right? When analyzing these players, step back and ask, what is their profile? What have they done so far? And for Tyler Johnson, 5 seasons in the league to never put up more than 360 yards in any season, of course, is discouraging. Not only that, but the one angle I don't hear anyone talking about, and probably Silva will talk about it in his matchups column, is that I worry about the longevity and ceiling of this Rams offense based on the injuries that happened this past week. Joseph Noteboom, left tackle, carted off. Steve Avila also injured in this game. And the Cardinals don't present a problem. We saw the Bills just put up 14 plays of 10-plus yards against Arizona's non-existent defense. But beyond that, if the Rams line is still banged up, 1, we know Stafford struggled under pressure last year, and 2, the 49ers, Bears, Packers, Raiders, and Blitzkrieg Vikings under Brian Flores are all coming to town short term. And so I can get there with Robinson and 2 wide sets. I genuinely worry about everyone else if Stafford is going to be under duress.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because I have so much faith in Matthew Stafford supporting fantasy wide receivers. Doesn't matter who they are. They could suck. Marvin Jones, I don't have the list in front of me, but I always tweet the list of guys that Marvin Jones that Matthew Stafford has turned into wide receiver kings, everybody. So I actually would probably be a little bit more bullish on Tyler Johnson than maybe Daigle is. Just being on the field as a wide receiver with Matthew Stafford to me is super valuable. Now, point is well taken. They have sustained massive injuries on the offensive line. It is going to be a problem for sure. But yeah, given the Puka stuff, if you're in a deeper league, I would probably want to be adding Tyler Johnson. I'd love to see them get Jordan Whittington some chances. Would love. This guy was awesome in the preseason, Jordan Whittington. I mean, awesome. So if you're in a deep league, I think, and we'll have some deep league targets here. We'll talk about at the end of the show. But yeah, I agree with Daigle. Demarcus Robinson first, then Tyler Johnson, then Jordan Whittington. Would you agree with that order there, Daigle?
Yes. Jordan Whittington, as you said, is a deep league target.
Okay. One other guy on this list I definitely wanted to talk about today is Jaleel McMillan. This was a guy that we talked a lot about over the summer, went out and absolutely iced Trey Palmer for the wide receiver 3 role that carried over to the regular season. He was wide open for a touchdown. He did end up catching another touchdown. He also has contingent value because he played some slot at Washington and he can play slot in the NFL, I think. So if something were to happen to Chris Godwin, he would get a boost there as well. And I don't know, Daigle, Baker Mayfield looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, it's been 1 week. Okay. But yeah, so I'm actually somewhat excited about Jaleel McMillan. Starting him is a tougher trigger to pull because Godwin and Evans are going to soak up so many targets. But once we get to buys and once we get to injuries, it's guys like Jaleel McMillan that I think I want to have on my team in deepish formats. What do you think about McMillan aggressiveness this week?
And I note that in the waiver column that, yes, Greg Dortch, Demarcus Robinson, a handful of others do offer more immediate production. But if you're looking at it through the lens of a month-long pocket, you're not going to start one of those guys. I instead just leap towards Jaleel McMillan, similar to wagering on someone like Jaden Reed in week 1 before we saw it last year. Because it's like you talked about, like Jackson Smith-Njigba, elite contingency upside, but then also McMillan proved he can produce around Chris Godwin and Mike Evans with that long 32-yard touchdown on Sunday. And McMillan was a great prospect. Had a higher target share than Rome Odunze 2 seasons ago from Michael Penix in Washington, and then last year just dealt with numerous injuries. So beyond that, I think McMillan's a very exciting player. We should be ahead of for upside since Demarcus Robinson's, Greg Dortch's, like as much as I like those guys, they're on the waiver wire every week.
Yeah, for sure. And like the one injury away stuff, I mean, it doesn't just apply to running back. Jaleel McMillan is one injury away from being an awesome start weekly. Speaking of one injury away, I do want to highlight these 2 running backs at the bottom because there were questions around both in the preseason, Tank Bigsby and Alexander Mattison. Tank Bigsby looks like he turned the corner, right? I mean, he was so bad last year, they couldn't even put him on the field. Offseason drumbeat was strong on Tank Bigsby in terms of positivity. Then he goes out in week 1 and gets the same amount of carries as Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne fumbles late in that game. I guess it was late third quarter. Bigsby ends up playing in crunch time a lot for the Jaguars here and played well. So clearly one injury away and maybe even some standalone value, a smidge of it for Tank Bigsby maybe. And then on Madison, I thought that it would be Dylan Lobby or Amir Abdullah in the pass down role. It was Alexander Mattison in the pass down role. And now we have Antonio Pierce after 1 week, after he talked up Zamir White all offseason. After 1 week, he's like, oh, you know what? It's going to be a hot hand. Alexander Madison's good. It's going to be a hot hand. So both of these guys are super interesting to have on your bench, at least. Daigle, what do you think about Bigsby and Madison?
I didn't believe Doug Peterson that Bigsby had earned a role from week 1. That's what we got. You mentioned the fumble, but even before that fumble, Bigsby had 7 touches. Etienne had 12. After the fumble, Bigsby outtouched Etienne 5-3. And at the end of the day, had as many carries, 50% of the team's carries, as Etienne. So I think Bigsby and Etienne are in a true timeshare, which is disastrous for a third-round Etienne for the rest of the season and great for Bigsby. Not only that, but let's speak on Alexander Mattison because our worst fears came to life already in week 1, that regardless of where you drafted Zamir White, he got box scored out of the game quickly. 10 routes to Madison's 24, Madison with an 18.5% target share. And I think most telling is that when the Raiders trailed by 7 points at any point in this game, Madison outsnapped White 14-0. Couldn't even get him on the field. So given that it's probably going to be matchup dependent, but if you look ahead immediately, Ravens this week, Raiders are 9.5-point road dogs. I think we're going to get a lot of Alexander Mattison in the short term.
Okay. I want to bring up a couple points here at running back first. Master Scout says, should I drop Raheem Mostert? Now, I wanted to highlight this because Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane both showed up on the injury report ahead of Thursday's game. I know Jalen Wright was a healthy scratch. If you're in any kind of deeper league, I would not drop Jalen Wright whatsoever. I probably won't be dropping Mostert either for any of these guys. But yeah, I think it's an important point here. We understand that anyone or most people who are active and getting touches in the Dolphins offense, I want to have on my roster. Daigle, thoughts on Jalen Wright and Mostert here?
We know what Jalen Wright can do if he's given a chance. I don't know if he'll get that chance, but it does certainly help that Achane and Mostert were no practicing in a short turnaround week against the Bills. And Mostert, it really just came down to their offensive line. This is something Miami beat reporters said all offseason, that at camp, the offense looks great, but the offensive line is just struggling. And on Sunday, they created just 1.4 yards before contact per attempt. For reference, no offense last year created less than 2 yards. They just literally couldn't get push, which is not good for a player like Mostert, who depends on that one-cut push and ability, unlike Achane, who ran 38% of his routes from either out wide of the slot. So I agree. It doesn't look good for Mostert, and we'll see on these injuries considering it's a Thursday game.
NBA Props says, what about Bucky Irving? So I presume Bucky was probably too owned to be on this list. But regardless, Dale, even if not, how would you compare Bucky to some of these guys like Bigsby, Madison, McLaughlin, et cetera, off the wire?
He is not too rostered. He's available, but then we are just saying, how long do we want to hold a contingency player? So as we implement the one injury away list this year to establish the run, it's really just a balance of using that list compared to the waiver wire. And that's why they are both updated all week long, but really mostly Monday and Tuesday, especially when we get more data. For Bucky, what happened was Rachaad White out-touched him 16-7 until the Bucs took a 30-14 lead. And then Bucky got 5 touches to Rachaad White's 4 the rest of the way. But the crowd was even chanting Bucky's name at the end of the game because I think everyone's just sick of their Rachaad White between the tackle shit. That is the same 1 yard or run into your center's ass every single time he gets the ball.
Yep. Yeah. You know, Bucky was so much more efficient, right? Like everybody was tweeting the box score. It's like, look at the box score. Bucky outplayed Rachaad White. Yeah, well, at that time, the game was already over, but still, I there's no doubt in my mind that Bucky can be more efficient as a rusher than Rachaad White. I think it remains to be seen if he'll get that chance for sure. One more drop question here that I think is interesting. I couldn't believe Blake Corum played 0 snaps. Could not believe it. Ronnie Rivers played 7, and Kyron was just an absolute workhorse despite the quote-unquote punt returner role, which I think we all agreed was somewhat overblown. But to be fair, we thought Blake Corum was going to play a bunch. We had a pretty reasonable projection in terms of Blake Corum touches here in this game. He plays 0 snaps. Daigle, are you holding on to Blake Corum right now?
I am, and everyone can check the top of the column for the drop list for players like this because I considered putting Blake Corum. It's actually the person I thought about the longest. But we do have some speculation, an idea that maybe was held out just because of the situation of the game, the opening one on the road, hostility in Detroit. So I'd still want to keep Corum and think that if push came to shove and Kyron Williams ever got injured, Blake Corum would still out-touch Ronnie Rivers.
All right. I know
it's week 1. We can't overreact. We can react. We can't overreact.
Yeah. I know some people have rest of season questions and trade questions. There will be a show tomorrow once our rest of season top 150 is up and out, as well as our in-season trade calculator for DraftKit Pro subscribers. Those will be out tomorrow, and we will have a show when we'll talk more about trades, etc. Okay, let's go to some deeper league targets here, Daigle. Come down here to the bottom where Daigle has some high stakes top 10 stuff. We talked about Madison. We talked about Tyler Johnson. We have Emmanuel Wilson on here. Jalen Naylor is an interesting one to me because Jordan Addison aggravated, or actually didn't aggravate, hurt his other ankle in this game, which doesn't sound good. Now, Naylor did not play a lot in this game, but he was dealing with an ankle injury of his own, and the Vikings rolled. If I was in a deep league, Naylor would be someone I'd be interested in. Any thoughts on him and anyone else you want to highlight here on this deep list?
One, high stakes leagues had open waivers on Saturday, so everyone basically ran to the waiver wire and thinned it out immediately. It's tough out there, but we do highlight some options here. Jordan Whittington also will be mentioned eventually, like in the notes. But yes, Naylor. At least it sounds like Jordan Addison's injury is so serious that they have no choice but to get Naylor involved here. And although he scored that touchdown, it was a design play at least to open him up deep along the boundary. So it was just one catch. Maybe that comes to fruition. Again, we're diving deep here. So players like him, Alec Pierce, who are just going to be out there in explosive offenses, those are guys I don't mind taking shots on here. And someone like Carson Steele, just trying to get ahead of more one injury away guys. You're on mute.
Good question here from Crash Media. He says, Devon Vele. So, yeah, Sean Payton likes this kid. I mean, he went out, he won the job. Credit to him. He outplayed Troy Franklin. Sean Payton hates Marvin Mims. Devon Vele is playing a bunch. Any thoughts on him as a waiver ad this week, Daigle?
The Broncos are a tough one because, one, don't watch Bo Nix's film. Like, whatever you do, don't watch that game. And then also, it's the fact that it was still the same thing that we got last year and trying to mix in the Brandon Johnsons of the world. Like Devon Vele, 31 routes, yes, but Josh Reynolds still running 43 behind Cortland Sutton's 48. Little Jordan Humphrey is still a thing, 15 routes, and Marvin Mims at 8 routes. It's so spread out for an offense we don't trust through the air outside of the backfield that continues getting pummeled with targets. So yes, Bailey, a deep target for sure, but still very thin in a non-potent offense.
Yeah. It's tough, like I think Vele will continue to get short area chances. It's just how
Mhm.
valuable is that? Like how valuable is that period?
He
So
turns 27 in December. I've tried to ignore that too, but man, he's an old rookie.
yeah. Darnell Mooney played every single snap
Yeah.
for the Falcons in this game. You don't get many wide receivers on waivers who play literally 100% of the snaps. Now, if you watch Kirk Cousins, it was ugly. I mean, downright bad. That said, they're not going to face TJ Watt and the Steelers every week. So I'm actually still have some optimism for Moondog as a literal every down player. And maybe they'll go to Michael Penix at some point. Maybe Michael Penix will be good. So I leave the light on for Darnell Mooney here. You have him at 1 to 2%. If I could get him for that, I'd probably be interested. Dago, what do you think about the Moondog?
Well, the fact we knew his role whenever Rondale Moore was lost for the season, and yet he's still available ahead of week 2 waivers tells you he's not going to go for much. People probably also see Kirk Cousins' performance and think he can't possibly sustain Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Mooney. So I think you get it for cheap, and certainly I'm in. I actually hate that game's Monday night. I'm really scared about what I'm going to do in DFS there. But yeah, I'm in on Mooney.
Okay. We got about 5 minutes left here. We can take a few questions here from you guys. Deadly Hayes says, what's up with Rico Dowdle? Should I drop him? So among these running backs that you have up here in the top 10, Daigle, how would you slide Rico Dowdle into that list in terms of dropping 4?
Prefer Ty Chandler and Tank Bigsby. He's probably a wash with Madison. The issue is Madison. I definitely expect to do better over the next month. And so if we're looking at this in pockets, because I think people forget how effing long this season is, I still want Madison. Rico, though, not a drop, just a hold. And it's literally roster by roster basis.
Yeah. I probably have a little bit more optimism on Rico Dowdle. This was a tough spot at Cleveland. And the discouraging part, though, I thought was Zeke got the goal line carry. I thought that was likely to happen. And Zeke looked good.
You say tough spot. It wasn't a tough spot for Zeke.
God, don't do this to me, Daigle.
Long season.
But they play home against the Saints, home against the Ravens, at Giants next 3 games for the Cowboys. If they can get some of these games going where they score 30, 35, 40 points like they had so many of last year, you're probably going to want to have Rico Dowdle. So, yeah, I'm still – and also, like, if Zeke got hurt, I mean, then what? So I'd probably be a little bit higher on Dowdle than Daigle, but it's totally fair on the Zeke stuff. Dontavian Wicks got dropped in Crip Kerr's league. This is not good for Dontavian Wicks. Not only was he clearly behind Christian Watson, I believe it was like 16 routes on 30-something dropbacks, but also now we have this MCL situation for Jordan Love. Would you be dropping Dontavian Wicks here, Daigle?
No, but again, depends on your roster. A contingency wide receiver that I probably put behind Jaleel McMillan now, but still someone who will be in the 1 injury away list, and I want to stash as long as possible, waiting for Love to come back. And it's like you said, the real concern there was Christian Watson was a full-time player, and it was still a rotation of everybody. Jaden Reed got there in this game. Remember, as I wrote in the matchups column, the Eagles allowed the most fantasy points to opposing slot receivers last year. The slot receiver gets there on Friday night. But if everyone's at full strength with Jordan Love, who the hell pops? It's just going to be a week-to-week thing. So still 1 injury away, but someone I want to stash.
Yeah, super talented guys still. I think there's a good point on Jordan Whittington here made by Eric Joseph. He says, Jordan Whittington did have a drawn-up play that went for a touchdown that was called back. That was like on I think it was a jet sweep maybe or something like that to Jordan Whittington that got called back. They'll probably get him more involved in week 2. I kind of agree. I
agree with your point, but the called back touchdowns has just jumped ship because if there's too many men on the field or it's holding, that is cheating, and the touchdown should be called back.
It's about intent.
Count that. No, the intent was to cheat. I'm not dealing with that.
They gave him, it's about intent. They gave him a play around the goal line. They intended to.
We're not getting into that.
Okay. Good question here from Nico. What about Justice Hill? So Ravens got behind. Justice Hill played. We knew that was going to happen, right? Derrick Henry does not play when his team gets behind. Again, just to reiterate, Ravens are favored in 14 of their next 16 games. Daigle, thoughts on Justice Hill?
Go back to week 1 last year when everyone had a legitimate choice between Kyron Williams or Justice Hill. We know who Justice Hill is. He's a no-ceiling pass-catching back who Derrick Henry is still in the way from. And as you tweeted, I believe the Ravens are still favored in 14 of their next 16 games. It just doesn't play out well for Justice Hill, who even if Henry were injured, does not have a ceiling we would want. Whereas someone like, again, Isaiah Likely showed us a 30% target share at overall tight end 1 week. That's the kind of chance I'm willing to take, despite the upcoming game scripts, not Hill really.
Trita says, should I drop Braylon Allen or Ray Davis for Jalen Wright or Alexander Madison? So Jets obviously looked horrible last night. This was a difficult spot at San Francisco, first game, etc. I have more faith in the Jets offense than they showed last night, but Breece Hall is not coming off the field, period. Anyways, what do you think about dropping Braylon Allen or Ray Davis for Jalen Wright or Alexander Madison?
Drop both for Wright and Madison. For Ray Davis, it is interesting, I'll say, because Ty Johnson is quietly dealing with a knee injury. And so maybe Ray Davis gets a handful of more touches on this short turnaround. And if James Cook were then injured and Ty Johnson's still banged up, those are the kind of chances and like opportunities you have to think about long-term, thinking ahead at least to the next game. So having said that, Madison and Wright, though, totally fine over these two guys. But for anyone not in this situation, Ray Davis is not like the worst player in this deal. Like I'm trying to hold on to Ray Davis where I can for Thursday.
Evan has a question about Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, the expected fantasy point stuff loved Wan'Dale Robinson. He got 12 targets, etc. You know, Malik Neighbors was shockingly, at least to me, behind Wan'Dale. Would you drop Dontavian Wicks for Wan'Dale Robinson?
Genuinely depends what you need. Wan'Dale, if you were actually going to flex him, and you can in PPR leagues, he has the Commanders coming up, which I'm sure will be a staple on Established Show on Friday night. So the outlook is okay, but again, we know exactly who Wan'Dale Robinson is. Only Rashee Rice has a lower depth of target last year. He just gets the shallow routes. And when you do that, you can't really have a ceiling because you're only doing these integrated touches. So Wicks, longer term option. Wan'Dale, if you're actually going to play him. Otherwise, Wan'Dale's not someone you stash either because he has no upside.
McChew says, should I drop DeAndre Hopkins for Jacoby Myers or Tank Bigsby? So this DeAndre Hopkins thing tilts me so bad because it seemed like the knee was going to be okay. Then it comes out it's not okay. He only runs 9 routes in this game against the Bears. I don't blame people for wanting to cut bait already on DeAndre Hopkins. One thing I'll say about Will Levis and Titans as a whole, Bears secondary is awesome. Like they might have one of the better pass defenses in the league. So I don't want to make too sweeping of conclusions about the way Will Levis played. But yeah, it's certainly scary on DeAndre Hopkins right now. Daigle, what do you think about this question? Drop Hopkins for Jacoby Myers or Tank Bigsby?
Even in my late round Titan stacks, and I have a lot of them, I did not expect to get anything out of the Titans in the first 2 games against, or first 3 games, I should say, against that, what is honestly a Super Bowl caliber Bears defense going back to last year when they acquired Montez Sweat, and then the Jets, and then that elite Packers front 7. I never expect the Titans to be good through week 3. After that, though, when they have to push the ball, we're going to get the Dolphins, the Colts, the Bills, and the Lions over the next month. We are holding the Titans for week 4 on, and you will hear that addressed more in our rest of season top 150.
Nick says, Jalen Warren, should I keep stashed or drop? So Jalen Warren dealt with the hamstring injury for much of camp, ends up getting the same amount of opportunities as Cordell Patterson, just 4 in that game against the Falcons in week 1. Najee Harris dominated the workload there. What do you think about hanging on to Jalen Warren?
Jalen Warren's still an easy player to hang on to because if Najee Harris were injured, it's not all going to go to Cordell Patterson. CPAT's still going to get his because Arthur Smith annoyingly loves him for 4 touches per game, but it would still be Warren, and we still expect Warren to mix in probably beginning this week. It's like a lot of players, the injuries carried over, and the coaches lied to us over the last couple of weeks. So that's what we're dealing with to start, Curtis Samuel included.
All right, time for a couple more here before we got to get out of here. Lane Furlong says, thoughts on AD Mitchell. So Anthony Richardson completed 9. I repeat, 9 passes in that game. He had AD Mitchell, as I played actually AD Mitchell in a DFS tournament. So I was actually watching this pretty closely. AD Mitchell was open. I don't mean like a little open. Open 3 times for bombs, and Anthony Richardson just missed him. Now you can say, yeah, Anthony Richardson can't throw. He sucks. He's not accurate as a thrower. And I can buy that, right? But still, while Josh Downs is out, AD Mitchell is going to have chances here for huge games. He's also going to have total air balls like he had in week 1. So that's my general thought on AD Mitchell. Daigle, what do you think about adding AD Mitchell this week? AD
Mitchell's not shown in the chart here, but he's absolutely mentioned in the waiver wire column. I mean, we didn't even know if he could earn targets, honestly, given that his profile was questionable coming out of Texas. But then to show up in his first career NFL game and have a 26.5% target share, of course, we're excited about that. And it's, as you said, 9 completions, but 33% of those went for 50-plus yards, and Richardson finishes the QB2 on the week. Just think of that potential. So although Mitchell did register Pro Football Focus's lowest catchable target rate because Richardson just sailed him twice, you're going to get those chances. It's a player we want to bet on. Now, long term, we're still asking, can Richardson actually support Pittman, who gets hammered underneath, Pierce deep, and Mitchell deep, and then downs from the slot? Probably not. But for the time being, until this lingering ankle injury, it's probably going to go for 4 to 6 weeks where Downs isn't even at full strength while it's still haunting him. Then sure, Mitchell's a player we're definitely interested in.
Real quick, Ashmal asked, when should we expect the first rest of season top 150 to drop? That will be Wednesday. We are shooting for noon Eastern. It's a ton of work behind the scenes to get the rest of season top 150 in shape. For DraftKit Pro subscribers, look around noon. And then we'll also have a show tomorrow to talk about that and show off our new in-season trade calculator, which is based on rest of season top 150. Last question to do. Actually, I just want to address this real quick. I'm not dropping JSN. I know it looks bad right now. I know it looks bad. Geno did not get a lot of volume against the Broncos. Broncos can actually defend the pass a little bit. It's scary on JSN because he's getting outplayed by Tyler Lockett. Low ADOT stuff again, but I'm not dropping him. I think you'd agree there, Daigle.
Oh, yeah. And it's probably not going to open up this week against the Patriots either. We'll adjust that in our rankings, or Thorman will. But after that, Dolphins, Lions, Giants, 49ers, Falcons, like a really good schedule where the Seahawks have to put their foot on the gas.
Bullish Choices says, thoughts on Trey Benson and Antonio Gibson worth holding in full PPR?
Trey Benson's an interesting one. I think that's more interesting than Blake Corum because at least we still have a giant question mark about. We still think Corum will eventually get touches, and we don't know the role. Trey Benson, we saw the role, and it's the fact that they used Amari DiMercado as a pass-catching back throughout the game. And so even if James Conner were injured, we now have to wonder what is the weight of Benson's contingency value. I did update the one injury away list already for everyone. I still have him at the bottom of the top tier, but I'm also going to get into this call with Dank and Leone soon. And we will continue to adjust for that because that was an interesting role change. Also, for Antonio Gibson, again, going back to these lingering injuries, I assume that Gibson was only used for, I believe, 4 snaps, something crazy like that, because he was dealing with that injury coming into the game. It was questionable.
Last one we can get to here today. Craig Taylor says, should I drop Michael Wilson for Greg Dortch? So to me, it's clear. Greg Dortch earns targets, and Michael Wilson has not shown an ability to do so. Now, you could say Michael Wilson profiles as maybe a better wide receiver. Greg Dortch is so small. All the guy does is go out there and earn targets all the time. So yeah, Daigle, any thoughts on this question? Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch?
Oh, it's Greg Dortch. It's by Marvin Harrison Jr. low. It's by Trey McBride low if you can. Just for the fact that I don't think Drew Petzing and the Cardinals want to play 3 wide sets and get Dortch on the field. But one, Dortch obviously earns targets anytime he's on the field, including this 25.8% target share and leading the team in receiving yards on Sunday. And then again, you look at the upcoming schedule, Rams this week, Lions, 49ers, Packers. They're going to have no choice because their defense is so bad to play 3 wide sets literally every game. So I love Dortch as a weekly flex guy.
All right. That is going to do it for the first waiver show of the season. If you have more questions, again, Daigle will be in Discord for DraftKit Pro subscribers at 5 p.m. Eastern. There's a channel in there. What's the title of the channel called people need to go to, Daigle?
Season-long office hours, 5 p.m. Eastern. I'll ping you anyhow, but okay. 5 p.m. Eastern. Show up.
Yes. So if we didn't get to your question and you have more questions, head to Daigle's Q&A. He'll get to as many as he can in there. Also, be sure you're checking out the full article. You can find it here, one injury away list as well. All right, Daigle. 1 week in the books, my friend. We are off and running. I'll be back with Daigle, Mark, maybe some others tomorrow here on the YouTube streets for our rest of season top 150 show, where we'll talk about our new rankings as if we were drafting today for the rest of the season. DraftKit Pro subscribers, look out for that rest of season top 150 rankings and the in-season trade calculator. For Daigle, for producer Adam, for everyone behind the scenes, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.